That looks okay. Alright. So the next thing we have, we watched a lot of right-wing stuff on here. Yeah, so the next thing we have is ex-con trans activist tells crowd at a trans rally to punch a TERF in the fucking face. So this happened last year in July. There was a trans pride rally in London. And what happened was this trans woman called Sarah Jane Baker, they had a bunch of speakers, and then afterwards, I think it was like an open mic or something, which is just a great idea, you know, nothing could possibly happen there, right? So what happened was this Sarah Jane Baker, who is an ex-convict, she got a bunch of years for kidnapping and torturing someone when she was younger, and she then assaulted someone in prison and got more time. She got up when the mic was not being used, said something like, if you see a TERF, punch them in the fucking face. A bunch of the crowd cheers, which just turned my fucking stomach, because I think that's disgusting. But yeah, we're gonna, there's a short thing about it, I'll show you some clips. I won't necessarily agree, I might on this particular subject, but we'll have to see. And it's not too important what they're like saying, so I don't know how much of all this we'll watch, but we'll get to see, because this was like shameful to me, absolutely disgusting. She's got like the trans pride flag, she's got an Antifa flag, you know, as if anyone still uses them in 2023, but whatever, let's go.
Last weekend at the London Trans Pride March, Sarah Jane Baker, a violent male ex-con who identifies as a trans woman, took to the stage and said this.
I was going to come here and be really fluffy and be really nice and say, yeah, be really lovely and queer and gay. No, if you see a punch him in the face.
So that was if you see a TERF and then punch them in the fucking face. I don't know, anyone can decide for themselves whether that's good activism or not. To me, I think pushing violent rhetoric, especially against women when you're like born male, is like the worst look possible. Like there's just no, how can you expect not to be seen as like a misogynist or part of a misogynist movement when you say that kind of shit and all the crowd who are similar to you, they're all cheering. Yeah, you hear that, right? Like, how many fucking people? I don't know how many people are there. It's a decent amount.
In the face.
Like, that's a big cheer for punching people in the face. I think that's pretty gross, personally. And then, like, the organizers of this event, afterwards, they were, like, sticking up for her, being like, oh, well, it's, you know, trans people are angry and shit. Yeah, she got arrested, like, the day after, which, you know, I'm not big on violent rhetoric. I think you're kind of throwing yourself to the wolves doing that, but
4:50 p.m. At this time, I'm placing you under arrest on suspicion of inciting violence. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention, when questioned, something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. The necessity for the arrest is to conduct a prompt and effective investigation and to prevent any further attempted harm to yourself or anybody else. Have you got any response that you'd like to call?
Yes.
Okay.
Trans rights are human rights, one struggle, one fight.
trans rights, human rights.
Those cuffs okay like that, they're not too tight now.
That's fine, officer.
Relatively loosely. Feel free to have someone, we will be going down to Charing Cross Police Station. If you want to have someone follow you down, you're more than welcome to. And the custody sergeants will explain everything from moving there forward. Alright, I'm just going to hold your arm on the way down, so I don't want you to fall over or anything like that, if you want to come with.
Do you need, are you okay to drive, or do you need to come with the driver?
No, it's fine.
You're good?
Trans rights are human rights.
So,
They won't get rid of us. Our existence is our resistance. You remember that?
can I come in the car with that?
There you go, Sarah Jane Baker getting arrested for, oh my god, we're on this one.
And queer and gay. No, if you see a punch him in the face.
But we're not misogynists, right? This person who tortured and kidnapped someone and did a bunch more time for violence in prison. We're not misogynists, we're not raising up the wrong fucking people or anything like that, right? yeah, let's see what some rightoids think of it. I don't give that much of a shit. I'm more interested, honestly, in what trans rights types think of this kind of thing. Because it's interesting watching people try and defend this shit when it's indefensible. Someone makes violent threats about trans people. That's not really acceptable. But it's acceptable to say it about TERFs. Punch them in the face. You as a born male, them as a woman. Like, come on. It's insane. And we cheer for it because we're all radicalized and ridiculous. And then if you complain about it, you're the bad person, I guess. Anyway, let's see what GB News says, for whatever that's worth.
So, to discuss the apparent rise in violent activism, please welcome author and professor of criminology, Joe Phoenix. Joe, that clip went viral, obviously, for very good reason. One of the most disturbing aspects of that clip is not even so much what Sarah Jane Baker said from that podium about punching women in the face, but that it got a huge cheer from the crowd. What's going on there?
100%. And in fact, when I saw that, that was the first thing that struck me. I mean, people like me and others have heard that sort of expletive and that sort of violence a million times before in the last 5 years, sadly. And I find what the most disturbing aspect was precisely that whoop that went up afterwards. But more than anything else, after that thing went viral, we then had a complaint to the police, and they say, well, the police failed after the complaint was made. Not quite. The police failed at that moment. There were policemen at the...
There were police there, watching this event.
Precisely.
Yes.
And nobody said anything, nobody did anything. We have a couple of legal problems, which I don't want to...
What they said about the police, the ones that were there at the time, it's a bit difficult, that one. I don't know if they would have been worried about inciting further anger. That should not be wet. They, I think they were probably worried about not inciting further anger. That's something you gotta think about with these kind of events. So I don't know, it's a difficult one. Maybe it did sound like they initially didn't want to and then did because of pressure, but I don't know how true that is. What I do know is the organizers were like going hell for leather defending her and not really dealing with like criticism from not just people like me, but quite a few people. It seems like they're happy with people spewing violent rhetoric at their things. Trans Pride London, Pride Plus London or something like that. I can't remember what it was called. Pretty shameful in my opinion.
I want to dwell on because I really want to talk about the reaction
to
what's happened. If you inhabit particular quarters of the Twitter sphere, what we've seen on, if you like, the other side is perhaps the most shocking and very disturbing normalization of violence against women that I've seen for a very long time.
Well, there's a few things to unpack there. I mean, let's start with some of the responses have said, well, this kind of thing happens on both sides of the debate. The MP Clive
would have liked an example of that kind of thing, but I don't know how much like violent rhetoric I see from trans towards like TERFs or whatever we're calling them. It mostly just seems to be like benign, banal like harassment, just atting J.K. Rowling over and over, like, hey J.K. Rowling, how can you reply to me? Now I'm being harassed. It's like crybaby shit. But hey, let's keep going.
Lewis said that you hear this kind of thing on both sides. I have never, and I've watched and read an awful lot in this area, I've never seen a gender-critical feminist call for a trans person to be violently attacked, punched, in any way. Anything.
Nor have I. Some of them have said, like, I know that Magdalene Burns said some pretty vile shit, and others do too. But, yeah, calling for violence, you just can't do it, man. Like, calling for violence, like, you're loading the gun that these TERFs are, like, supposedly shooting you with. There's not much more to it than that. Like, if you want the people that hate you to have ammo, then call for violence. It's that simple. It's a complete waste of time. It's this over-radicalized bullshit. Like, we're angry so we can do what the fuck we want. It doesn't work like that. And we're not going to get anywhere like that because normal people are going to watch that and side with the TERFs.
Anything like that. And if something were to happen like that at a Let Women Speak event, I don't think the crowd would cheer. I think they would stop that person from speaking.
I think they'd be deeply shocked to begin with, because we've all made a point. You know, it doesn't matter what sort of politics that you have within this movement, people have made a point to recognise the rights of transgender individuals.
Yes.
Right? And that's just how it is. But so you talked about the fact that the MP said harm on both sides.
Yes.
Let me tell you a little bit about this. As a criminologist, we have a concept called techniques of neutralization. Now, techniques of neutralization are a series of rhetorical devices. So the way you reframe something so that you basically deny the harm that's being done.
Right.
Famously, a man called Stan Cohen wrote a book called States of Denial, which was all about how states deny the crimes that they do when they commit human atrocities, right?
There is a heck of a lot of denying all kinds of things. What I found before I really got like super into this kind of thing, like really radicalized over it, I guess you could say, paradoxically, because I'm kind of radicalized about being more moderate, which seems strange. But yeah, like my friends would just completely refuse to believe shit that I said. When I talk about like my experiences with like trans communities over the years, it would just be like, well, I haven't seen anything like that myself. Of course you haven't fucking seen anything like that yourself, because you like agree with them. You're part of the same fucking thought cult. Like that's part of the whole problem, honestly. But hey, that's just how it is. We're getting more used to their kind of tactics and stuff. It's interesting hearing someone kind of break it down a bit. But then you have to imagine, or you have to accept, that there's mad people on both sides. So like there's TERFs that take that shit way too far. They just perhaps aren't stupid enough to start telling people to punch trans people in the face, because you'd have to be stupid. And I think this Sarah Jane Baker person is stupid, to be clear.
And there are 5 techniques of neutralization. I just want to go through them because they're all present in what happened.
Interesting.
So the very first one is denial of responsibility. Right? It wasn't my fault. Well, what we saw immediately from the Trans Pride organisers was...
Oh, we're getting into the Trans Pride organisers. Yeah, I saw this at the time. It really fucking pissed me off. They were... You know, it's... Fuck, what am I trying to say here? They were like sticking up for her. They were suggesting that because of how angry people are, that it's okay. So, you know, we're just blaming everyone else for our shitty situation. And to be fair, there's a lot of bad shit that's been going on, but we have to accept our role in it, and that getting more and more radical isn't solving anything. It's making more people hate us, especially when we tell people to punch women in the face, you know?
We didn't invite Baker.
Yes.
That came as part of an open mic.
Okay.
Then the second thing that you have is a denial of harm. Well, it was just words, wasn't it really? Nobody was hurt. No one was really the object.
Oh my god, what the fuck would have happened if someone was hurt? What if someone watched that and did punch a TERF in the face? Like, you have to think about that. And we're so caught up, we're so lost in the source that we don't. Because we think everything we do is so fucking righteous. How is telling people to punch women in the face? How is telling people to punch women in the face righteous? That sounds misogynist, you know? It's insane. How can anyone defend that? And yet these people did. And this happens all the time.
Even though it is classified as incitement to violence.
Technically, yes. But incitement to violence, you need to have it.
And these are the same people, by the way, who will completely stand by the whole, you know, Donald Trump was complicit in January 6th, which I agree he was. But then if something happens because of your words, you have to take responsibility for that too. I think Sarah Jane Baker is extremely fucking lucky that no one did anything.
An actual individual.
Right.
So that broad crowd thing is going to be a public order offence.
Yep.
So, yeah, they're going to say, well, it's just words. And actually, when Baker spoke them, Baker didn't actually mean it. So they deny the harm. Then denial of the victim. That's the big one that we see here. Well,
oh yeah, basically, they believe it. Fuck me, I'm not on it today. I'm feeling ill. Basically, Tin Flicks, how's it going? I'm okay. I'm not feeling too well. I've had a bit of a cold. But otherwise okay. How are you? What was I saying? Shit. Let me just go back a bit, because I'm dying today, man.
Okay.
Broad crowd thing is... And actually, when Baker spoke them, Baker didn't actually mean it. So they deny the harm. Then denial of the victim. That's the big one that we...
Yeah, so the basic thing is, well, the TERFs deserve it, as far as I can tell. Like, they're the ones oppressing us.
we see here, well, TERFs deserve it. And in fact, if you think about, again, from Twitter, there were a lot of trans rights activists who were reposting that picture of the Polish woman who tried to hit the Nazi with her handbag.
Yes.
Right? Saying basically, you know, these aren't the
Yeah, equating TERFs with Nazis is definitely one. I don't know, if you punch a Nazi and you get arrested for it, it's still your stupid fault, ultimately.
real victims. We're the victims here.
Yes.
Right? So that's 3
But like at the same time, I'm not going to feel too bad for the Nazis, because like, fuck that shit. But if you're that radicalized that you'll go and punch someone and you get in trouble with it, for it, should I say, that's on you.
techniques of neutralization. The fourth technique of neutralization
Autistic Oxen, how are you doing today?
is to condemn the condemners. Right? And of course, we saw that in buckets and spades over the Twitter sphere, particularly with the trans rights activists, where they were saying, actually, this is righteous trans rage. Right?
Yeah, I remember that. Fuck. Wasn't that the organizers as well? She might have said it was something else. I'm going completely off memory. I haven't brought any of this shit up. I just remember it, and she's so far confirming what I said. So I think I'm doing okay.
Right? That's all Sarah Jane Baker was expressing, was righteous trans rage. And then the very final one.
Whereas people... Okay, hang on, sorry, one sec. Assuming you've seen the Conservative Manifesto where they say people are only born as one sex, basically denying the existence of the intersex community. As far as I know, intersex confirms the existence of the binary, because intersex conditions are like conditions to do with like your reproductive system and like can change like your chromosomes and stuff, so they're not XY or XX. But I'm pretty sure, as far as I know, every intersex condition, bearing in mind there's no like true, what am I looking for? Hermaphrodites. Like there's no real true human hermaphrodites. Like those are like snails and stuff like that. So as far as I know, every intersex condition specifically affects either men or women, and they still follow the same pathway. So I don't think it's the same, because I don't think intersex is like a third sex or anything like that. I did used to, but it kind of seems through research and talking to people that's not the case.
Is an appeal to higher loyalty. And that's where we are right now. The appeal to higher loyalty is, well, this was done in the name of the good. And in fact, what we see from, again, that particular part of Twitter is people talking about Sarah Jane Baker as a political prisoner.
Okay. Now, but there was also a response from...
She's not a fucking political prisoner. I mean, she's not even... I think she was spared jail in the end. I don't know that I think she should go to jail for saying something like that, but she shouldn't fucking say it. At the same time, you've got to think about what might happen as a result of my words, and you never know. I could sit here and say, I wish this person would die, and then 2 hours later they actually die. Like, you know, I'm nobody, so the chance of me doing that and it actually having an effect on something, pretty low. But if you're stood in front of like a group of largely pretty radicalized people who are probably quite angry because there's been a bunch of shit going down, especially in 2023, which was a pretty rough year, you know, let's be real. Like, you gotta think about that kind of stuff. If you're gonna be an activist, if you're gonna be a representative, I mean, I don't know much about Sarah Jane Baker. I'm pretty sure she does like interviews and stuff like that, like kind of lauding up her time in prison, beating someone up and cutting her own testicles off. Doesn't really talk about the kidnapping or the torture, but hey, I don't know. But yeah, if you're gonna put yourself out there as an activist or a figure, you have to think about stuff like that, and you have to be careful what you say. And if you're not capable of doing that, well, maybe that's just not the right position for you, huh?
The young woman who glued herself to the floor when Kathleen Stock was speaking at the Oxford Union, she wrote a long thread sort of saying, she was saying, I don't justify violence or threats of violence, but what I'm saying is that we as a community are so under attack, subject to whatever, you know, phrases such as genocide has been used, denying...
Yeah, the trans genocide, I need to cover that. People don't really say it as much anymore. I remember there was that, what was that trans person's name? Polly People or something. I need to go back over that, because that was pretty nuts. She was pushing the whole genocide thing, trying to get people to recognize the trans genocide. Even like Vorsh, who's quite big, like he's lost it a bit because he stopped debating people and he stopped reaching out, and he got caught with lolly on his computer, which is a bit disgusting. But even he was pushing the trans genocide at some point. and like people like Demon Mama, you know, bringing up the definitions of genocide and being like, well, this is technically happening. It's a bit ridiculous. I think there has to be a certain level before it's a genocide. I mean, even no, I'm not going there actually. No, we're not starting any fights over that. Anyway, let's keep going. Let's keep going before I dig myself a hole.
The existence of trans people, all these incredibly hyperbolic phrases that have a complete disconnect with reality. But when people use those extreme phrases, then I suppose they can justify violence as a form of self.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd agree with the Tory policy, should I say, is kind of more dangerous towards a lot of people with health issues because the NHS is kind of fucked. But hey, I've been voting against them for years. I was talking for years about what I saw as like a potential like cost of living crisis, and hey, look, it happened. Crazy. But I was voting against them the whole time. I voted for Corbyn's Labour. I'll vote for Keir Starmer's Labour. I'll vote for fucking whoever. I just want them out at this point. It's been my whole adult life pretty much. I think I was either 19 or 20 when the Tories got into power. So yeah, I don't really know anything else, and it just seemed that shit's got worse and worse, you know. So I there's no love lost for me and the Tories, you know. I'm not coming at this like a rightoid. Like, actually, we should embrace conservatism. It kind of seems like it's not been working, and if conservatism does work, then we haven't had a good version of it, I guess. I'm more like centrist leaning myself, I guess.
Defense, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. But that's also part of the condemning the condemners.
Gotcha.
Right? And
Yeah.
it's also part of the denial of responsibility. So it's not us. We're the ones under the attack. We're the real victims. Now, the thing about these techniques of neutralization is they're only ever used when the community that's using them know that what they're doing is incorrect.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
That's an interesting point that I haven't thought of. I thought it was going to be boring. I wasn't really going to watch the people talking because I'm not too interested in very anti-trans people talking about this kind of shit. But sometimes they come out with some good points, I guess. Conservatism works only when everyone has assets worth conserving. Hey, maybe, yeah. I think it probably also worked a lot better when there was less of a population, less mouths to feed. I don't think people factored that in as much as maybe they should, because things like the NHS, they're only ever going to get more and more and more and more expensive. And funding it is going to be difficult at a certain stage, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't want for better, because it's become terrible. I remember, like, you stopped being able to really walk into doctors' clinics after, like, when COVID happened. But then after COVID, it doesn't really seem like they ever recovered from, like, the huge backlog that was created, that was already kind of there to begin with, because it wasn't going great. But it seems like after COVID, like, it never really recovered. Like, our services just kind of stayed the same. Like, I don't know if I can still walk into a place now and kind of see someone. Like, it's almost impossible to get a hold of a doctor. You got to do these e-consults, and then, like, half the time they don't even respond anymore, and it's just a nightmare. So people with fringe cases that are suffering most as they get shaved off first. Yeah, potentially. I mean, I'd have to think about that more. I have, like, my own, like, mental health struggles with a very rare and contentious condition, shall we say. I have something called misophonia, like, really, really severely. So, yeah, trying to get anything for that is a nightmare. And then you try and do jobs and no one takes it seriously. So it's like, okay, fuck. Need an appointment for walk-in centers. Yeah, fair enough. I remember, like, when I was at uni, there was a place in the city I lived in where, like, you could literally walk in and just put your name down and just sit for a while until someone called you in. Like, what would this have been, 12, 13 years ago? It's changed a lot since then. And it's not good enough. Like I said, like, fuck the Tories, you know. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have lots of stuff. You might get the odd, like, local service that's kind of half decent, but it's difficult to get anywhere. Like, I'm trying to get referred to somewhere miles and miles away from where I am, and I never hear anything. Yeah, it's rough. I'm not gonna try and defend, like, what the Tories have been doing, what the NHS has turned into under their watch. You know, ultimately you have to hold the people responsible. And I'll go as far as saying I think that they probably caused a lot more issues for trans people than these kind of activists that I talk about do. It's just that I think that these activists are also worth talking about, and no one really is. Like, I could be any number of, like, trans people from Britain shitting on the Tories right now, and I don't think it's worth adding another voice to that, quite frankly.
You have to recognize it first to deny it second.
That makes
sense. Which is a very interesting place to be at, because in fact what we're seeing is that rhetoric that's basically saying, no, really, despite everything, it is okay to punch a woman in the face.
But it doesn't work, does it? I mean, we've seen...
Yeah, jeez, I hate the over-radical stuff, personally. Yeah, this person's bringing some interesting points. I need to think more about it, I guess.
Actual physical assaults at some of the Let Women Speak events organised by Posey Parker.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Posey Parker getting soup thrown on her. Now, I do not like Posey Parker, like, at all. I think she's, like, larpy as fuck. I think wearing a hat that says woman on it, it makes it look like you're worried that people won't know you're a woman unless you wear it. It's the kind of shit that someone who looks like me looks like they should be wearing. Like, I think she's a bit of a joke. She's, like, running for fuck something in, like, the middle of Bristol, which, I mean, good luck to her, whatever. Like, I don't think she'll get many votes because I think she's a bit of a joke. But yeah, if you pour soup on someone like her, you're just giving them victim points. You're just giving them ammo for their gun. I don't see the point.
For Kelly J. Keane, that is. For instance, was it in New Zealand?
Yeah.
And a 72-year-old woman was punched in the face.
Yeah.
That was caught on camera. We've all seen it. And this does not...
Jesus, are they going to show it? I haven't seen that one.
...not endear anyone to these activists.
Yeah, there's been quite a few weird things about that kind of thing. Like, she's been seen with those kind of people, and she's very, like, conservative. A lot of these TERF types are not really conservative. Like, a lot of them are quite liberal-leaning. But she seems to break with that and actually is kind of conservative. They were, like, neo-Nazis and stuff like that. And I mean... You know, I don't know how much... I don't like playing the whole guilt by association thing, but I mean, I have enough things that I don't like about her that whether or not she hangs out with neo-Nazis isn't even really that important to me, I guess. Like, I don't like her anyway. But, you know... And as funny as, like, someone kind of bigoted getting soup thrown on them, it's not the best look, necessarily. And they said something about someone getting punched in the face at one of her events. I need to look into that. Like, I'm hoping they'll show the... Wait. No, that's behind her. You know what? They're not going to fucking show it. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
No, and of course it's not just, you know, things that happen in New Zealand. I can talk about an event that I was actually at the beginning of February at the University College London, a UCL Women's Liberation WPUK conference. And indeed, Sarah Jane Baker was there. And the real toxicity of that is that somebody like Sarah Jane Baker whips up the protesters.
Yes.
Right? So there's a clip that's...
Yeah, someone like Sarah Jane Baker, in my opinion, should just be nowhere near any of this shit. She doesn't seem intelligent. She seems incredibly over-radicalized. Absolutely fine with telling people to punch people in the face, no matter how misogynist that comes across coming from someone who's born male. I don't think she should be anywhere near any of this shit, and everything she's doing is incredibly irresponsible. And it would have been the easiest thing in the world for this London Trans Plus Pride to just disavow it, to just say, we're not cool with that kind of thing, you shouldn't do that. But no, they had to defend it. Why? Because it's a trans person?
Making its way around Twitter where a young woman was shouting expletives, basically saying, you know, F you, get the F out of here, and all this very, very hot atmosphere. And then, of course, what happened later on that afternoon is the protesters broke...
Wow, 71-year-old. Jeez. I mean, again, I need to look into it. I don't know what the context is, but on the face of it, it doesn't sound good, you know? And if we can't make our case without violence, then do we even have a case? Like, that's what it seems like. And that's the other thing that gets me so, like, black-pilled on this shit, I guess, is that we just don't seem to have many arguments. When I watch actual trans people on these kind of shows, most of the time they're not making arguments, they're just doing guilt by association and just trying to divert the conversation instead of having the conversation. And, you know, they'll say stuff like that's the whole tactic and stuff, but it just kind of comes across like they don't actually know anything about the stuff that they're supposedly there to discuss. And I don't think that's a good look either. I don't think we need to look like a bunch of angry know-nothings, which to me is what it looks like, so...
broke free from their enclosure, if you like. They went to go find the ground floor and the basement floor where the women were meeting in rooms, and they were literally baying and banging at the windows, right?
Yes.
Which, and again, is also quite aggressive. But then...
God, that sounds like, was it Riley Gaines that was like chased into a room at some college? Like a bunch of people banging and shouting like trans rights. I'm gonna have to find that now.
Exactly like you said, this is what higher institutions are doing, universities, where children are going to learn this.
Are we going to get sound, though? Yeah. And I don't know how much of that is even TERFs and not just, like, angry men who don't seem to like anything that isn't exactly like them. And I think the only way around it really is to be critical of everyone, honestly. You know... And you see the kind of stuff that a lot of trans people push when they go after J.K. Rowling constantly on Twitter and then make a huge big deal of it when she responds because they got harassment from her followers, which is wrong. It happens on both sides, in my opinion. It's wrong either way. Like, there needs to be some kind of middle ground. And ultimately, I don't agree with, like, you know, the not 1 inchers, you know, the people that just want everything to do with trans completely, like, gone. Like, I have as many issues with them as the radical TRA types, I guess. Yeah, I definitely see how that rubbed people the wrong way. Unfortunately, it kind of seems like what she said is half come true with how, like, trans men have, like, shot past, like, trans women. And quite a few people that are trans are autistic. That's unfortunately part of it, and I wonder what kind of abuses maybe put on kids by some parents who don't know how else to contain their kids or something. But I mean, that's conspiracy theory. I don't have proof of that kind of thing. I just worry about that happening. But yeah, I can totally see how she rubs people the wrong way, and the fact that she goes on about this particular issue so much. But the problem is we kind of made it into a self-fulfilling prophecy by, let me just I'll just mute this because I don't think they're going to show sound. We kind of made it into a self-fulfilling prophecy by, like, going after her so much as we do. Like, there was shit. I don't know if you know who someone called Sophie Molly is. She's she was a Green Party candidate in Aberdeen or something like that, and she was, like, constantly atting J.K. Rowling with, like, all this, like, insulting shit. Or someone called the Pissed Off Lawyer on Twitter. He does this shit as well. Like, they'll constantly go at her with all this insulting shit, like tweeting at her. And then as soon as she responds, which brings a bunch of, like, haters their way, suddenly they're being harassed and they're, like, a victim and all this shit. Let me just see if we have sound yet.
Tell you different ideas, even when they're not our own. But then yesterday...
Now we need the sound because they were, like, screaming. She was, like, locked in some door. I don't know about ransom. I'm trying to find something that's not some shitty fucking news thing. Because I don't really care what Fox News thinks about this, you know? I'm not gonna find it. No, there was, like, loads of them, like, banging on this door she was, like, stuck behind because all these protesters, like, locked her in this place. It's like, it's insane. Like, you're not gonna reach people from being that aggressive and that authoritarian, that strict about who can speak and shit like that.
Afterwards, a woman was actually assaulted by one of the protesters. So, you know, we see this sort of violence happening all the time, and until and unless it's recognized as what it is.
I will say another potential issue. I've read a bunch of, like, TERF media, and the way it's presented, like, if you found a new website for the first time and you just read through a bunch of articles, which is pretty much what I did, because I had a period at one of my older jobs where I had nothing to do. But, like, what was it? Yeah, it's the way it's presented. You could read through a bunch of them and pretty quickly come out with the impression that, wow, all these trans people are violent. Like, so many of them are, like, so fucked up, which is not true. It's like, it's overrepresented because they report on specific things. They report on bad things that trans people do almost exclusively. So, like, it's easy to get the impression that it's more than it is. But even just a few people is way too much. And this over-radicalization and this, like, anger is not helping, unfortunately. If I can recommend a study, Uzi et al. On the autism LGBTQ debate. The idea, we already deviate from social norms, it's less of a step. Potentially, yeah. I'll have a look into that. Autism is something I need to get into more. There's so many topics I need to cover. It's gonna happen as it happens, because I don't stream as much as I should. Yeah, true. It's very easy to get that kind of bias where you see so much of something that you assume that that's like the entire population, when it certainly isn't. I'm not here to like shit on trans people. I'm here to shit on trans people that are doing stupid shit. Don't get me wrong, but like, yeah, it's kind of hard to get like a realistic perspective for most people, because it's the same with like gender critical. If you listen to certain people, every single thing about it is transphobic. Every single thing about it is, you know, you get people that equivocate into Nazis and shit. What I find is that quite a few of the concerns are actually kind of valid. Like things like the concern about sports, the concerns about kids and like what teachers and kids are like talking about that the parents don't necessarily get access to, because any parent is not going to want like an adult keeping secrets with their kid from them. Like that sounds terrifying. Like I don't have kids, I have a nephew, and I'd be like terrified, especially if one day I was in some kind of responsibility for him and I find out that there's like people keeping secrets away from parental figures about him. You know, that's terrifying to me. And I think a lot of the trans activists don't have kids and don't really understand that.
It is.
But yeah, I mean, the bias gets fed to you so much on both sides on the internet. That's kind of, it seems to be what it's designed for, because this kind of radical bullshit is what pushes algorithms, is what pushes the revenue on Twitter and so on. I think like Twitter and shit are fucking appalling. I use it literally just because it's somewhere to rant about shit that I don't really have like family on or something, so. But then occasionally people will find it, like my band was meant to be doing trans pride. I don't give a shit because I'm withdrawing from this whole thing anyway. Like I don't want anything to do with Pride Month. I don't want anything to do with trans pride. But yeah, we got kicked off because someone found my Twitter, so that's nice. Yeah, didn't even bother telling me, which is really nice of them. But anyway, yeah, here we go.
Is violence against women, right?
Yes, perpetrated by men.
Yeah, like I get like letting off steam. I don't think I say stuff that's like violent, but I definitely say stuff that people could, what am I trying to say here? I definitely say stuff people could get offended by, but I think often when someone's offended, they should stop and think why that is, instead of just riding that emotional response. Because I used to do the same thing, and a lot of topics, a lot of conversations used to make me incredibly anxious. But like when you desensitize yourself a bit, when you get more used to it, you realize that it's kind of irrational to be like that, and it's actually fine, you know.
Perpetrated by men more often than not.
Yes, but that's another interesting point, isn't it? It's insofar as this kind of aggressive, violent behaviour is far more common amongst men. I mean, the crime statistics reveal that indisputably, and yet this is a group of people who are trying to say, but we're women like anyone else.
Yeah.
Surely that's undermining their own point, isn't it?
Well,
Yeah, I think that's something I get in trouble for, to be fair. I don't like saying trans women are women. I prefer to use trans women and then women, because I don't want to use cis. People don't like cis. Just stop using it. It's easier. But yeah, I try and use trans women and women, because I know I'm not a woman. I wasn't born female. I don't have ovaries. I don't have any of that shit. I had surgery that gives you, you know, it's more aesthetic than anything else, and it's more matching your body to alleviate gender dysphoria, which is what I have, and that's kind of how I see it. I think the major issue is neither side gives solutions to the issues the other side has. They just utter them. Just understandable being a very, very emotional argument. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think I do have at least a few solutions, such as us being realistic about the fact that we weren't born women, and that certain women's spaces, arguably maybe someone at the very least with a penis shouldn't be going into, like open locker rooms and stuff. Like toilets is something that I think, as long as you pass, it's okay. That sounds mean, but ultimately, if you're bucking societal norms, then you're gonna have to expect some pushback, because that's just how it is. So if you're gonna insist on still looking like a man, but you identify as a woman, so you go in the women's, you're probably going to get shit for it. Like, I use the women's, I'm post-op at this point, I have been for a long time. I don't get any shit because I try and fit in. I don't draw attention to myself. I don't make a scene. I don't do anything that should be bothering anyone. And like so the toilet one is quite easy really, because the other side of it is that there's really not a way forward. Like, we can't have third spaces because that would put so much onus on businesses to pay money to rejig their entire like toilets, make it more inclusive for how many people, you know, like what, less than 1% of the population or whatever it is. Maybe it's more now. And then sports, I think we should take the L on. I think we should maybe think about just not competing with the women pending more evidence, because none of the evidence I've seen has done much but to say we kind of need more evidence. And I've seen things that suggest that HRT doesn't remove your strength fully after like 2 years. And often people will bring in arguments about muscle mass and like this, that, or the other, when your strength kind of comes from a whole bunch of different factors. Like, for me personally, I've met cis women, I've met cis women like my height and like similar build, like quite skinny. And I'm able to lift like so much more than these people can. It's insane. Like, I'm kind of there with the other guys, like being able to pick up like whatever, and I get someone to help me who looks like they're the same size as me, and it's like, no, I can't do that. I'm like, okay, get someone else then. So yeah, to me, I mean, I'm only one person. Other people have experienced more strength loss or whatever, but it's all anecdotes. If mine's an anecdote, and so is theirs. And we need the science to be robust. It needs to show that trans people can be trans people can be integrated fairly and safely in women's sports. So I think there are solutions out there, but solutions are never good enough for one side or the other. And you're always going to get the radicals that want absolute, like, complete removal of anything to do with trans, which is not going to work because people have gender dysphoria. People just are trans. It's just how it is. These people have to exist too somehow. We all have to share the same space. And then I don't know what the counter argument is. Like, some people want like gender neutral everything. That's never going to work. Like, sex is way too ingrained in our society, and for a good reason. Like, we reproduce that way. It's one of the most fundamental things about our existence. We evolved from the same things as everything else. Like, if you look at a cat's paw, it's like the thumb is like up here, but they've got similar like things to what we've got. If you look like a deer's hooves, they kind of have, these two are really big, and like that's what they stand on. They've got two smaller ones like up here, and then the thumb is kind of like up here. Like, excuse me, you can see like the through line. It's clear where we came from. And yet we want to, like, the difference really is that we're able to think on a much higher level than a cat or a deer or a dog or whatever. Like, I don't know. To me, like, we can't say that gender completely trumps sex when most people's gender seems to be just whatever they came up with.
You'd think so, but of course, because they have an appeal to higher loyalty,
yes,
we're doing it in the name of trans rights.
But how hard could it be for some of the prominent trans activists to say, we condemn all violence, you know?
Yes. I'm not fucking prominent, so it doesn't fucking matter me saying it. I mean, I said it at the time, and like whoever was running this trans plus pride social medias, whoever was running that was not having any of it, like mostly ignoring people, like bullshitting people, saying, oh, we addressed it. You didn't address it. We should be disavowing bad things when they happen. People like Keffels end up being prominent because of that. People who scam their audience and push this insane campaign to get rid of a, at the end of the day, legally functioning website. And for what, you know? It went down for a week and that was it. And then she's got everyone's money and it's great. If I can give a slightly different view as a disabled person rather than someone who's trans, disability accommodations often make things better for people in general, but we're also seen as an inconvenience at first. Trans community does need help integrating as a relatively new phenomenon on this scale. The issue is, where is the line drawn? Autistic people can't remove all overstimulations from society, so we adapt on our end by learning where safe spaces are. Yeah, I get you. I don't think there's anything wrong with that in principle. I think where it becomes a problem is you've got, say, things like pronouns. Like, you can tell people what pronouns to use, but you only have the power to tell people what pronouns to use if the person will then use them. And a lot of people just won't. And a lot of people don't understand what pronouns are there for, which is for another person to refer to you, which they will do based on what you look like. When you hear like a far-right person insisting that pronouns are based on sex and having to correct themselves because they called a trans woman who looks exactly like a woman a she and then have to say he afterwards, that's not natural either. So like kind of everyone's a bit dumb on that thing. And I think the other problem I would say is it does kind of seem like they're pushing for like gender neutral everything. What was it? I think it was Alec Gunter. I'm not using him as like, he's not representative of anything because he's extremely stupid, but it was something like we don't need men and women, just people, which I just don't think you're going to get many people on your side with that. And the other problem again is we act like being misgendered is like being stabbed sometimes. And if someone's like a they them, everyone's going to misgender you unless you tell them. Even if you're wearing a badge, people don't read things. I worked at a coffee shop. We had no water one day. We had like signs everywhere down the way that people came in, up to the till, explaining this and saying what we can do and what we can't do. People will still ask for coffee, walking immediately past all these like huge A4 signs saying we can't do this, that, and the other. They still ask for it because people just don't look at that kind of thing. They look at what they see, the whole picture, and they make a snap judgment when they pronoun you or gender you or whatever. I was told the other day, it makes sense in a pronoun argument. Trans person has the right to put a boundary in place with pronouns. People don't have to respect said boundaries. They have to be willing to accept the consequences of said boundaries. It depends what the consequences are. For me, the consequences of not calling me a she is we're probably not going to be best friends. There's some other people, they're going to accuse you of bigotry. They're going to make all kinds of judgments on you. I think the one other thing when it comes to like they, them in particular, is it's kind of, you're expecting someone to agree with like queer theory. And if they don't see that and they only really see sex, they're just not going to use like they, them. And they don't have to subscribe to the same theories of how the world works or how humanity works as anyone else.
We see with the J.K. Rowling situation where all of the death threats and rape threats are going one way. They're coming from extreme trans activists who, by the way...
I don't know about that. It sounds like a lot of trans people do get harassed by J.K. Rowling's followers. It's just that I'm not suggesting it's one way. Both the trans side and this person's side seem to be saying it's one way. I don't think that's helpful. I don't think... Because it kind of seems like he's, playing cover for some of the bullshit instead of addressing it head on, which is exactly what the other woman was saying trans people are doing with like the Sarah Jane Baker example, for example.
I don't think represent trans people as a whole at all.
I agree.
Yeah, of course they don't. I mean, anyone using Twitter has to remember it's really not a big proportion of the world that is even using Twitter. And for me, like, I don't take it too seriously as a result, which means that people are going to look at my tweets and be like, oh my God, you think this? And it's like, do you know what a joke is? Do you know what irony is? Do you know what anything is? I'm British, that's how I talk. But yeah, Twitter it's very important. And I think what bothers me, so many things bother me. I'm just going to fucking ramble because I've got literally ages today. I can go as long as I want. Yeah, I think that the danger for trans people being too online and too invested in like Twitter communities or like Discords or like Tumblr or whatever the fuck it is, the danger is they start getting fed an extremely unrealistic view of the world. For me personally, I get the odd comment now and then. I get the odd person being a bit of a shitter, people shouting things from van windows or something, which to me suggests they're a weak person because they can't say shit to my face. They have to say it from a moving vehicle. There were these guys, like me and my partner went, I don't want to say exactly where it was, but like there was a football game on and we were on the same train as these like guys sat opposite us, like going to this football game, getting off at the stop where it happens. They had nothing to say to me the entire journey until they got off and one of them like mouthed off at me and I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. And it's like, it's the most pussified shit. People don't realize how cucked they look when they can't even say something to me, someone tall, yeah, but quite skinny, without being like in a moving vehicle that's going away from you. Like, you're completely safe. That's the most pussified shit. Also, Twitter is very America-centric. It's a very hyper-individualistic society. Yeah, I agree with that. Which means people only care about their immediate cone of vision, not the world around them. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, it's very American-centric. I tend to presume that people assume I'm American. It doesn't really matter for the purpose of what I'm talking about usually. But there's a fair amount of like British stuff on there. There's a lot of people shitting on Labour at the moment, like whatever your perspective is, I don't know. I haven't been following too much because I'm mostly just focusing on getting the Tories out, and I've had other shit to care about. So.
There are a minority of very aggressive and violent people who are, I think, doing more harm than good to trans people. But we don't see it come the other way. We don't see gender-critical feminists sending rape and death threats. That simply doesn't happen. And everyone can see that. So why can't the activists say, look, we know you can see what's going on, acknowledge reality, then acknowledge that violence is wrong. And
I don't know if I can agree that no one's been making, like, rape threats. I mean, the thing is, for a gender critical, that'd be extremely, like, hypocritical to do so, because there are feminist ideals behind their beliefs. You know, things like women's spaces, women's sports, etc. And we can go on about TERFs not being feminists all we want. That's what's called cope, quite frankly. But I think he's downplaying the other side's responsibility in this, because there's definitely a lot of harassment that goes the other way. The problem is, like I said earlier, so many people invite it. So many people think that because what they're doing is punching up, that means that they can punch up infinitely, and the people above them can never punch down, and when they do, they're the ones in the wrong, which is completely insane.
And then go from there.
Well, that's a really interesting one.
I think ultimately, if I knew anyone that was coming out as trans and like nervous and didn't really know what to do, I think the first thing I would fucking tell them is like, keep it away from social media maybe. Don't get into some weird group on Twitter that believes complete insane things and pushes politics that no one wants. GC won't come out with rape threats, but they know when they target an individual trans person, their followers will make threats of corrective RP. I don't know so much about corrective RP. Rape, I guess. Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying earlier. Like, whenever J.K. Rowling does respond to someone that constantly is punching up, as it were, at them, like, all the followers do, like, swarm to them. And to be completely clear, I'm fucking against any of that shit. I don't think harassment is good either way. But yeah, I mean, they're a bit more sneaky about it. And someone like J.K. Rowling, I don't know whether I think she's transphobic, because I just don't care that much. I never even liked Harry Potter anyway. But if she is, she has done a good job of hiding it, because when someone says, well, what she said that's transphobic, it's actually not that easy to find things she's said that are objectively, like, bigoted. It's usually things like retweets and likes and follows, which someone like me, I follow people because I follow perspectives. I don't really give a shit whether I agree with them or not. It's just to get different views on things. But because I follow someone, I'll be told that I'm like a Nazi and stuff. So it's kind of at that level. Like, Twitter logic is fucked. Honestly, any new people like to transitioning, I think should stay away from fucking Twitter like the plague. I think Rowling is wised up, so to speak, because of having a PR firm. Yeah, of course. But then that's if you're fucking with someone that's extremely rich and extremely powerful. Like, that's the kind of thing you got to that's the sort of thing you got to bear in mind. Know who you're going up against, should I say.
So there is somebody on Twitter, a trans rights activist, who has distanced themselves utterly from the sort of violent rhetoric. However, one of the reasons it becomes very difficult for them to distance themselves in the fashion that you're suggesting is
it because they get ostracized? Because they get fucking ostracized to shit. If you're a trans person saying the kind of shit that I'm saying, you get ostracized to fuck. You get treated as if you're the enemy. You're no longer a trans person in these people's eyes, and things like trans pride are not for you anymore, and things like having a trans community are not for you anymore because you disagree with them. You can get trans people soying out at you for like the most like nebulous, tiny little fucking thing that might suggest that you're like an alt-righter or some shit. It's bizarre. It's also a good point. GC movement does seem to have a financial advantage over the individual level, the LGBTQ movement. Yeah, definitely. I mean, hey, trans people are, what's the word I'm trying to say? They're a lot more predisposed to like poverty for a lot of reasons. And again, we need to, like, there should definitely be more understanding of that from the other side. And that's part of the problem. Trans people don't understand or know gender criticals, and gender criticals don't really know or understand trans people. And I kind of know both. So I can sympathize with both and just kind of work out what I think from there. I think it's the only way to really do it. Oh my God.
Is because then they'd have to confront that thing called male pattern offending. And they'd have to recognize that actually, even within their ranks, as in, male people.
I don't know, I've come across some truly fucking vile trans men. They weren't born male. There are every few LGBTQ spaces that aren't based around alcohol. Very few. Oh, okay, I understand. Yeah, I get that. I mean, when I went out back in the day, we're talking like 2009, 2010-ish, we all like went to gay bars and stuff. And like, I'm one of those people, like I'm extremely quiet around people I don't know. And I'm extremely quiet around people in general. And I pretty much had to drink in order to like come out of my shell a bit. So whenever I tried not drinking, it would just be miserable because I didn't know what to say to anyone. I didn't feel confident talking to anyone. So like, I think the anxiety part was probably more of a problem. And it's probably similar for a lot of trans people. I mean, autistic people quite frequently have social anxiety, and I have it really badly. But yeah, I mean, that's the other thing. Like a lot of the places you meet up, they're probably going to be like bars and what have you. I have some very wet guitars. For fuck's sake, man. I need to get some more water, but I'm going to do it. Water. I need to get some more water, but I'm going to do that after this because I'm rambling a lot, and that's fine.
Male pattern offending.
Yeah, male pattern offending. I don't know if I agree with this. Maybe. I mean, hey, there's got to be a reason why men are the ones that carry out a lot of the violent crimes, the sexual assaults and stuff, which is not to say women don't do it. I'm not sure, maybe. Maybe it's dangerous having a lot of men getting very radicalized. I don't think taking HRT really changes your thought processes that much. It didn't really with me. I got really emotional on my T blocker, but I was only using that for a few months. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe. I don't know how true this is.
And they'd have to recognize that actually, even within their ranks, as in, male people who identify as women.
The thing is, there's a fair amount of like male gender criticals. But then the other thing is, a lot of the male like transphobic people who are just very bigoted in general, maybe those are more the contingent that are doing the kind of the death threats and the rape threats towards us. I'm not sure. And even then, if you hate trans people, you're probably not going to threaten to rape them. I don't know. It's fucked on both ends. I don't know. The crazy, like, extremist end has been dominating the conversation for way too long. It doesn't represent loads of us. I just realized I put whatever it was I put somewhere, I've now completely lost. And it's fine. I'll deal with all that at a later date. Yeah, anyway. Fuck, I get distracted so easily. I'm trying to get looked at for ADHD. I'm like convinced I have it now. I know everyone does, it's trendy, whatever. But yeah, I'm convinced I have it. And I've never had like really any help with it. So I say as a power fantasy, it seems to come from people who have lost control, so want to regain it by taking away from others. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I've dated control freaks before. Yeah, it sucks how often, like the thing with abuse is it often is a cycle. If you've been abused, you're more likely to either abuse someone or be abused by someone else. And, often the people that perpetuate the abuse have had bad things happen to them. But it's a lot, I guess it's a lot for some people to take that step to understand that what happened to you is wrong, and doing it to someone else is equally wrong. because it's not their fault. But it's I don't know. I have my own like past with that kind of thing, and it's something I've thought about extensively. It's a thing that when it comes down to it, all I can really do is just not perpetuate the cycle. I mean, I'm not having kids. I don't have the hardest life in the world. You know what I mean? It's not difficult, really. You know, I'm with someone that cares about me and I care about. You know, it's just not going to be a problem. And the other thing is, I don't know, I have different levels of understanding for different people who have done different things. So it's hard. Like, abuse is a huge topic. I'll probably, I think I touch on it now and then. Trauma-caused conditions like BPD, yeah. Yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, I used to act in all sorts of ways that nowadays I'm like, Jesus Christ, what was wrong with me? Yeah, all you can do is recognize your faults and try and work on them, ultimately. The problem is there's too many people out there that don't want to recognize their faults.
That we don't know and probably suspect that even though they identify as women, it doesn't override that historical pattern of male violence.
Is that right?
That's potentially. I don't want to jump in and agree with what this woman's saying, because I need to look into it way more. It's potentially. The other, I mean, to me, it kind of seems like trans activists, you think more of them are like born female nowadays, what with how many more trans men there are than trans women, but I don't know ultimately.
So the pattern is retained?
We don't know. There's only been one proper study that's been done.
And we have almost no data. Okay, so it's, I guess she's kind of admitting that it's speculation to an extent, but at the same time, there's reasons why men are overrepresented. Men are overrepresented in certain crimes, and certain crimes specifically that victimize, especially women.
And it's very, very small and it's very local. And that's one of the questions that we desperately need to ask. What is this relationship between gender identity and biological sex? Because certainly in the area of crime, the sex patternation to offending is so great as to be perhaps the only true fact we have in criminology.
Okay, well, there's an awful lot to go into here. I'm sure we'll have you back. Joe Phoenix, thanks.
Yeah, it was quite interesting, actually. I didn't expect it to be. Like, it's very easy to see GB News in the top left and be like, oh, it's just going to be stupid or whatever. But that's not always the case. And I just try and take the arguments rather than, oh, this person associates with this person, that means they're bad, and stuff like that. And at the same time, I don't think I'm jumping in with both feet saying, oh, everything this person's saying is correct, when I don't know that. So it's interesting. I think with the gender identity thing, it's very, I don't even know what it is personally. It's not based on anything that you can observe. And to be fair, nor is gender dysphoria beyond people just going around looking kind of like I do, but being born male. I think the difference with gender dysphoria is that, like, dysphoric trans people will tend to be very committed. And, like, when you look at them, it's, like, obvious that they have that because of the way they present themselves, because of pretty much everything they do. Whereas with an identity, you're kind of just picking how you are. And that's fine in theory, but, like, can you have rights based on something you chose to be? Is the acceptance and prominence of trans men over trans women because tomboyism is seen as somewhat normal, whereas male cross-dressing seen as sexual? I think probably to an extent. You've got things like toxic masculinity, which I do believe in. I think often when toxic masculinity comes up, people conflate it with all masculinity, which is not what it means. But I think men are a bit more aggressive about, like, gay men, effeminate men, stuff like that. As to why, I'm not really sure. It could be for all sorts of reasons. Usually people want someone to shit on. Like, if a man's looking weird and every man around that man is looking normal, then it's very easy to other that person. And most of these, like, bully types are pretty weak. So they need, like, what look like the easy targets, and, like, effeminate traits. Being a man makes you look weak and stuff. I mean, I've always been straight. Like, I never actually was into guys or anything. But I got called gay, like, constantly, because I've always had, like, effeminate mannerisms.
Thanks so much for joining me.
Oh, this is over. Okay.